All right, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Gulf of Mexico Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Task Force meeting. My name is Eric Ponsley, and I'm from Kearns and West, and I'll be a member of your facilitation team today. I'm working with my colleagues Kyle Vint and Sam Ramsey, who will be providing webinar support and note-taking as well. We'll also be preparing a summary from the meeting. We're going to start first and kick off with some logistical items before we jump into the heart of the meeting. So here, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Samantha Ramsey, to give some webinar instructions for those who are new to the WebEx events platform.
Thank you, Eric, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to briefly review the webinar participation instructions to orient everyone to the meeting controls and settings. It's important to note that there are two types of participants on today's meeting, the task force members / presenters and members of the public. And as such, there are different setting controls that I'll review for each participant type. Task force members and presenters will have the ability to unmute and mute themselves throughout the meeting. The mute button is located along the bottom toolbar, and we ask task force members to please keep themselves muted when not speaking. To moderate the discussion queue, we are asking task force members to use the raised hand icon to enter the queue. To access the raised hand icon, please click the participants button at the bottom right of your screen. And the participant's hand is the small hand icon located at the bottom right of the participant's pod. You may use this button to enter the discussion queue, and we ask that you lower your hand once you're done speaking. You can share questions and comments using the chat pod in the bottom right of the webinar window. And we just want to note that messages shared in the chat pod are viewable by all task force members and presenters. And lastly, task force members are encouraged to keep their webcam on throughout the task force meeting. So if you cannot keep your webcam on throughout the entire meeting, we ask that you turn your webcam on when you are speaking or asking a clarifying question. Next slide, please, Eric. For members of the public, you'll be muted throughout the task force webinar and will not be able to unmute yourself. During the public input opportunity at the end of the task force meeting, we will be inviting oral comment from members of the public. At this point, Eric Ponsley will prompt you to provide your oral remark, and Kyle Vint will individually unmute you. If needed, you can provide your comment using the chat button at the bottom right side of your screen, and chat messages sent by members of the public will only be viewable by the facilitation team. Next slide, please. For all participants on today's webinar, you will have the ability to modify the layout of your screen as you would like. You can click the layout button on the top right of your screen to adjust your webinar view. When content is being shared, you may use the plus or minus icon on the left side of your screen to adjust the zoom of the shared item. And you can also toggle the center of the screen to increase or decrease the size of the presentation and speaker video. Next slide, please. Lastly, if you encounter any technical issues throughout today's webinar, you can reach out to myself at sramsey@kearnswest.com. You can also message Kyle Vint using the WebEx chat function. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Samantha. Okay, so we would like to start the task force meeting with a tribal acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge the importance of tribal nations in this process, and our tribal partners are integral to achieving effective coordination around the future of offshore renewable energy in the Gulf of Mexico region. And BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, respects tribal sovereignty and self-governance and will continue to engage federally recognized tribes through government-to-government consultations. So we'd like to continue the welcoming and opening remarks now with Amanda Lupton, who's the director of BOEM. So Amanda, off to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today to welcome everybody to the inaugural meeting of the Gulf of Mexico Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Task Force. Thank you all so much for being here today. It's a really exciting day. As noted already, I'm the director of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. My name is Amanda Lupton. I really want to acknowledge the great team in the Gulf of Mexico region under Mike Salada's really wonderful direction and the great group of the BOEM team that put this together today and have been helping to drive this conversation. And I also want to acknowledge Governor John Bell Edwards, who, of course, asked BOEM to convene this task force to advance offshore wind in the Gulf of Mexico, and express my gratitude for his initiative and leadership to advance opportunities for renewable energy in the Gulf. We are so pleased to have so many task force members here today representing the states of Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama, and I'm sure this will be the start of a great conversation moving forward to explore clean energy opportunities in the Gulf more broadly. As you know, the Biden-Harris administration has made significant progress to advance this ambitious plan to confront climate change, create good-paying jobs, and begin the nation's transition to a cleaner energy future. I'm excited to discuss the federal strategic vision for offshore wind, as well as clean energy, and the department's role in advancing these efforts. BOEM's vision and mission for renewable energy, the way I see it, is first, we're driven by the need to act on climate. We know we must transition to a clean energy future, and renewable energy like offshore wind can play a critical role in meeting the country's clean energy needs. Second, when we think about climate change, we think about jobs. And we know that renewable energy can create thousands of good-paying union jobs and a robust supply chain in the United States. And I think there are especially unique opportunities in the Gulf of Mexico. Third, we need to develop offshore wind responsibly. We need to avoid impacts to ocean users and the marine environment and rely on science as we do so. Fourth, we need to robustly engage ocean users and especially continue to recognize the critical role that tribal nations play and engage them robustly throughout the process. And finally, we need a smart and transparent process so that we can provide greater certainty to the industry and stakeholders alike. As I noted, the climate crisis is really a centerpiece of the president's agenda. And developing offshore wind in the United States will help address the threats of climate change and create thousands of good-paying jobs. The Department of the Interior, along with the Departments of Commerce and Energy, all came together to set an ambitious administrative goal of 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030, which alone will create nearly 80,000 jobs. Meeting this goal could trigger more than $12 billion per year in capital investments in projects off our coasts, generate enough power for 10 million Americans home each year, and avoid 78 million metric tons of carbon emissions. BOEM is playing a really critical role in implementing the White House strategy. To date, we have leased 1.7 million acres of the Outer Continental Shelf for offshore wind. We have 17 commercial leases in the Atlantic, and we plan to advance new lease sales and complete the review of at least 16 plans by 2025. And I should note that those plans, those construction and operations plan, represent more than 19 gigawatts of clean new energy for the nation. We are exploring new wind energy areas in the Gulf of Mexico, of course, through this conversation today, and the Pacific off the coast of California. The administration's commitment to renewable energy is reflected in BOEM's recent budget. The fiscal year 2022 budget proposes additional funding in support of stakeholder engagement, science, and staffing for increasing BOEM's capacity to help facilitate the nation's transition to a cleaner energy sources that are both safe and environmentally sound and contribute to our nation's national security. The budget also supports growing offshore wind capacity in a manner that is supportive of disadvantaged communities in particular. We are committed to responsibly growing the industry to reap the benefits of clean energy and job creation. And as you can imagine, we've been very busy. Just since this administration came in, we have an enormous amount of milestones under our belt through the great teamwork here at BOEM. We announced the Vineyard Wind project, which is the first approved commercial scale offshore wind project in the United States. This 800 megawatt energy project will create nearly 3,600 jobs and be built by union labor. This action actually represents a government-wide approach to offshore wind permitting which also took stakeholder ideas and concerns into consideration in every step of the way. In addition, we've made significant progress on identifying wind energy areas on both the east and west coasts. And in fact, just last week, we advanced the proposed sale notice for the New York Bight, which is 800 acres between New York and New Jersey, which could mean up to 8 new lease areas. And importantly, for the first time, BOEM included a labor provision as a lease stipulation to drive towards union-built projects. We also advanced potential areas in the Pacific in partnership with the Department of Defense and the state of California. We've also initiated reviews of 3 other wind projects. All to say, with all of this great work and many more that the BOEM team has moved forward, really represents a strong partnership with other agencies that demonstrate a sea change for offshore wind and renewable energy more broadly in the outer continental shelf by taking a government-wide approach that will catalyze the industry. We know that the challenges we face regarding the climate crisis are too dire to delay, but our desire to move forward will not outpace our steadfast commitment to do this. We're working to create greater certainty for the industry, state and local governments, tribal nations, ocean users, and other partners and stakeholders. We need to advance both an efficient and effective process for reviewing plans to develop existing leases, and need an inclusive and expeditious process for identifying areas for potential lease sales, just like we're going to be discussing throughout this task force meeting. You know, the Gulf of Mexico oil and gas industry really has the ability and experience to play an integral role in the nation's offshore renewable energy industry. I'm sure you all will discuss many of the possibilities over the next few hours, including the request for interest announced recently to assess interest in potential renewable energy development in the western and central planning areas of the Gulf of Mexico. I, for one, am really interested in understanding the broader opportunities for clean energy in the Gulf. This region has the know-how for OCS energy development, significant infrastructure already, and innovative thinking that can drive new and exciting developments in the Gulf region. As you all know, BOEM released a request for information, which I'm sure Mike will talk more about, and I encourage respondents to think creatively and innovatively about the unique opportunities to really lift up the Gulf of Mexico region. We recognize how important both commercial and recreational fisheries are in the Gulf of Mexico as well, and that's why we're working to improve our process to further engage the industry. And I'll say, we know that the offshore oil and gas development has coexisted with commercial and recreational fishing for many years in the Gulf. And we intend to use those lessons learned from that relationship as we develop renewable energy as well. We're also committed to improving our relationship with tribal governments, and we will continue to prioritize protecting marine ecosystems and advancing science and monitoring to guide our decisions. Outreach and public engagement are critical components of BOEM's renewable energy development process. We are taking a regional approach to stakeholder engagement. We have convened several intergovernmental task forces, much like this one, to coordinate planning, solicit feedback, and exchange information. So far, we have several coastal states in the Gulf of Maine, Carolinas, the New York Bight, and they include representatives from federally recognized tribes, federal agencies, states, and local governments. And we expect to convene the California task force later this summer to talk about next step in the Pacific. I am so pleased and excited that the Gulf of Mexico has joined these ranks. I look forward to seeing this task force grow and continue to mature as we move forward to explore clean energy possibilities in the Gulf of Mexico. And as we do so, we'll continue to work with our many stakeholders as we move forward. We encourage the industry to engage with stakeholder groups and ocean users as well, such as the commercial and recreational fishing industries throughout the entire offshore wind or clean energy project process. In conclusion, I'll say again, there's no doubt that the climate crisis is before us now. Transitioning to clean energy will be critical to help the US tackle this issue. The Gulf of Mexico region has unique expertise and infrastructure that can play a significant role in advancing innovative solutions to be part of this transition. In its first 5 months, the Biden-Harris administration has catalyzed the offshore clean energy industry, generating a roadmap that will help the industry create tens of thousands of jobs while combating the negative effects of climate change. But the full environmental and economic benefits of offshore energy can only be realized if we all come together to ensure potential development is considered and advanced responsibly. BOEM will work with industry, tribes, government partners, the fishing community, conservation organization, labor unions, and task forces just like this one to ensure that any future offshore energy development is guided by science and done in a safe and responsible manner. Thank you all so much for attending today's meeting. We look forward to working with everyone as we advance the administration's climate and renewable energy goals and help create a cleaner, more equitable energy future for our nation. Thank you so much, everyone. I look forward to the discussion today.
Great. Thank you very much, Director Lefton. I would now like to introduce Governor John Bell Edwards from the state of Louisiana. I invite you to provide a welcome as well.
Thank you very much. And Director Lefton, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this task force today as we take our first steps toward developing offshore wind energy in the Gulf of Mexico. And Amanda, I'm certainly mindful that this is not our first conversation. And in fact, I've had an opportunity to speak with Secretary Holland as well. And I do appreciate the time and attention you all have given to me and to the issues around the Gulf of Mexico and achieving the right energy mix. I also want to thank and recognize all the many elected and tribal officials who are attending today. I appreciate you all being part of the process, and I am excited to engage with all of you to identify the opportunities and also to overcome the challenges related to the development of offshore wind in the Gulf of Mexico. You know, our coast here in Louisiana is a working coast, and Amanda mentioned that. Oil and gas, commercial fishing, recreational fishing, shipping, sediment mining, military activities, and many, many more activities all coexist currently in the Gulf of Mexico. And part of this task force's effort will be to navigate and avoid conflicts with the addition of offshore wind. We're excited about the possibility of substantial wind energy being produced both in the state waters, but also in the federal portion of the Gulf of Mexico. And we are actively developing policies that will encourage wind production in our waters and will continue to engage with BOEM and with the Secretary of Interior about this exciting new energy source. My office will be hosting a series of virtual stakeholder engagement events next week in what we are calling Louisiana Wind Week, which coupled with this meeting represents the beginning of a conversation with officials, with stakeholders, and with the public. And it is my sincere belief for Louisiana, there really is no better example of how improving the environment and improving the economy can go hand in hand than offshore wind development. For decades, the Gulf of Mexico has played a vital role in our nation's energy security and independence while supplying jobs and revenues. As we look to the future, I want the Gulf of Mexico and the state of Louisiana to remain an essential component of the country's energy story. Offshore wind allows us the opportunity to build off the existing skill sets and expertise of our oil and gas industry, to continue to take advantage of our ports and our offshore vessels. We have a very mature infrastructure and workforce here in Louisiana, but we can also find new ways to meet the needs of our energy future while doing our part to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Louisiana's expertise in designing, fabricating, and installing the foundations for offshore platforms played a crucial role in creating the nation's first commercial offshore wind farm at Block Island. And one of our leading boat builders is building and will operate the first Jones Act compliant service support vessel that will be deployed in several of the upcoming East Coast wind projects. As more and more of our economy electrifies, it will also lead to economic development opportunities, and we know that. Earlier this year, CF Industries announced that it will be adding a 20 megawatt electrolysis plant to produce green hydrogen at its Donaldsonville, Louisiana ammonia manufacturing complex, which, by the way, is the largest ammonia facility anywhere in the world. When complete in 2023, it will be the largest green ammonia project of its kind in North America. Just as I'm committed to the development of new economic opportunities that will set up Louisiana to succeed in the emerging low-carbon economy, I'm also determined to address the greenhouse gas emissions driving up temperatures and accelerating the devastating effects of climate change. Last summer and fall, Louisiana was hit by not one, not two, not three, but 4 hurricanes, including one of the most powerful storms in recorded history for Louisiana. In February, huge swaths of our state, including many of the same communities that had been devastated by hurricanes, were impacted by extreme cold and ice, a winter storm, which is very rare in Louisiana. And already this spring, we've seen torrential rains causing flooding and more suffering across our state. All the while, sea level rise is engulfing our coastal wetlands and working against our efforts to protect and restore our coast and the communities and culture that is supported by our coast. And that's why I'm committed to putting in place policies and planning mechanisms that address greenhouse gas emissions in a major and a sustaining way here in Louisiana. Last year, by executive order, I created the Climate Initiatives Task Force. In that same executive order, I pledged our state to the goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. As this Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Task Force examines the future of wind energy development in the Gulf of Mexico, I want to underscore the crucial role that offshore energy production currently plays in my state's coastal adaptation efforts. Since 2006, by an overwhelming vote of our people, Louisiana's Constitution has committed every dollar we receive from the federal government from offshore oil and gas production to the protection and restoration of our coast. These impact assistance funds from the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act, and we commonly refer to it as GOMESA, amount to the largest recurring federal climate adaptation and pre-disaster mitigation funding that our state has. Impact assistance through GOMESA amounts to about $100 million each year that we combine with other state dollars and settlement funds from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill to implement a coastal protection and restoration program that this year alone will consist of 18 dredging projects benefiting 14,000 acres of wetlands and investments in improvements to 109 miles of hurricane protection levee. These investments in the coast contribute to around 10,000 jobs every year with much higher than average wages. Speaking for Louisiana, I do want to strongly support legislation being developed by Senator Cassidy and Senator Whitehouse to remedy the current inequity in federal energy impact assistance, both for existing oil and gas activities as well as future offshore wind development. Revenue sharing with Gulf producing states does not apply to most of the energy production occurring in the Gulf of Mexico. With offshore wind and energy development gearing up across our nation's coast, I want to encourage Congress to recognize that federal offshore wind energy will impact adjacent states, and we should receive impact assistance from these federal offshore leases. I applaud, Senator Bill Cassidy from here in Louisiana, working across the aisle with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island to develop legislation that will provide impact assistance for federal offshore wind energy development and will expand impact assistance currently available under GOMESA. I recognize that our nation is in the early stages of a profound transition in our energy mix. I also recognize that climate change is very real. Greenhouse gases released by human activities are the main contributor, and that it simply cannot be ignored any longer. I'm committed to addressing these issues in my state in order that our governments, our businesses, our institutions, and our people are positioned to thrive today and for decades to come. And relative to this task force, I want everyone to understand that Louisiana is all in on offshore wind. So I want to thank you again for the opportunity to address you today. I appreciate your attendance, and I look forward to all of the great work that you all are going to do as we develop this source of renewable energy in the Gulf of Mexico. And God bless everybody.
Thank you very much, Governor Edwards, for those words. We have one more welcome we'd like to start with, and here I'd like to introduce the BOEM Gulf of Mexico Region Director, Mike Salata.
Good morning. I'm Mike Salata, Gulf of Mexico Regional Director. I'd like to welcome you all to the inaugural meeting of the Gulf of Mexico Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Task Force, and I'd like to thank Director Lefton and Governor Edwards for their instrumental roles to bring us here today. The creation of this task force to collaboratively explore renewable energy in the Gulf is a state, tribal, and federal partnership, falls right in line with the Biden-Harris administration's priority in pursuing renewable energy goals. And last Friday, also in conjunction with these goals, as Amanda said, BOEM published a request for information, RFI, seeking public input on renewable energy development in the Gulf. The collaboration with tribes, states, and federal partners has already begun, but with this GOEM Regional Task Force today, I want to declare the official start to expanding the energy landscape in the Gulf of Mexico with the goal of holding a renewable energy auction within 2 years. As Director Lefton mentioned, the Gulf of Mexico's oil and gas industry has the skills and expertise to play an integral role in the nation's offshore renewable energy industry. In the Gulf, I believe they can help be a driving force to realize renewable energy development and a lower carbon future in the offshore Gulf of Mexico. We know that renewable energy is here to stay, and opportunities exist here in the Gulf to advance renewable energy goals. Working with the Department of Energy, BOEM has evaluated multiple renewable energy resources, including wind, wave, tidal, current, and solar. Solar has the largest resource potential, but wind has the greatest current technical accessible resource potential. The RFI offers approximately 50 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico to be considered for wind energy development. The Gulf Coast states combined comprise 32% of the shallow water offshore wind potential in the United States. And the RFI does not just cover wind energy. The Gulf of Mexico region is an energy producing region, and the goal is to embrace cleaner forms of energy to meet administration climate goals, to create an integrated energy basin. So we want to know about opportunities like green hydrogen and other alternative fuel generation. We want to hear from you. And there are many advantages in pursuing the development of renewable energy in the Gulf. Leveraging the oil and gas industry's expertise in marine operations and industrial fabrication, our region is well suited to develop offshore wind structures. And as the governor said, the oil and gas industry was an integral part in the fabrication of the nation's first wind turbines. The 5 steel jackets from Block Island Wind Farm offshore Rhode Island were fabricated at Gulf Island Fabrication in Houma, and Keystone Engineering, a Louisiana firm, designed the foundations for those steel jackets. And the lift boat Robert was also designed here and assisted in that development. And due to the similarity of skills they use in the oil and gas industry, the labor force in the Gulf of Mexico has much of the expertise required for the development of offshore wind. The mild climate and warmer waters can decrease operation costs and increase turbine access. The benefits all contribute to lower capital costs because of better turbine access, shallow water siting, and lower labor costs. Direct access to existing industrial supply chains of oil and gas industry can contribute to reduced operation and maintenance costs and the cost of fabrication and installation. Despite all these advantages, of course, there are still challenges, the challenges of hurricanes and softer soils that are present, but these are engineering issues that the oil and gas industry are accustomed to working with after operating in the Gulf of Mexico for decades. As turbine design continues to advance, the lower average wind speeds can be addressed through design. These are challenges that could facilitate future economic growth, collaboration, and innovation. An analysis of jobs, earnings, regional domestic product, and regional economic output to support the construction of an operation of a single 600 megawatt offshore wind project in the Gulf of Mexico was also been analyzed by our studies. The results indicate that a single offshore wind project could support approximately 4,470 jobs and 445 million in gross domestic product during construction, and ongoing 150 jobs and 14 million annually. The development of the offshore industry calls for appropriately fitted vessels suited to new industry's needs, and we're excited to see the offshore wind industry taking the first steps in acquiring the boats they'll need for the job right here in the Gulf. As the governor said, the first Jones Act compliant offshore wind turbine installation vessel is being developed It's a $500 million investment that supports 700 construction jobs. And its hull and infrastructure require 14 tons of domestic steel, many of that sourced from Alabama suppliers. And that vessel is expected to be available at the end of 2023. So in conclusion, we want to facilitate coordination among federal, state, local, and tribal governments regarding wind energy leasing and alternative energy sources in the Gulf of Mexico by sharing information about existing Gulf of Mexico activities and marine conditions. We also want to establish a way forward for the Gulf of Mexico Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Task Force and provide opportunities for public input on the topics being considered by this task force. I am optimistic we can be successful in our collaboration to share data and limit conflict use as we move forward, as demonstrated by our history of working together on coordinating oil and gas development with other uses like fishing and minimize impacts to resources like endangered species. The future of developing offshore renewable energy is bright here in the Gulf of Mexico. We have the industrial know-how for developing energy resources in place and a knowledgeable labor force that will be well suited for ongoing operations. Once again, thank you for being here today. Let's hope our efforts here today help create a blueprint for developing a renewable energy industry that will create new jobs, stimulate our regional economy, fight climate change, while helping our nation achieve true energy independence. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mike. Before we move on, we have one more person who will be providing some opening remarks. I'd like to invite Congressman Garrett Graves to join us, and Congressman represents the 6th District from the state of Louisiana. So welcome.
Thank you, and I want to tell our governor good morning. Governor, good to see you. Director Lefton and Director Salata, thank you all very much for allowing us to join you today. Look, a lot of people have said a number of important points, and I certainly don't want to go over everything that folks have said, but I think there are a few important points to make and maybe to look at from a little bit different perspective. Number one, I really do appreciate you all taking the lead and trying to aggressively lean forward on an energy strategy that includes looking at all of the resource opportunities in the United States, including the Gulf of Mexico, the offshore. It's important to keep in mind that, as the governor noted, Louisiana's coast is a working coast. We don't have these white sandy beaches on our nearly 7,800 miles of our coastal shoreline. We often have wetlands, we have industrial facilities. It's a very different coast than basically the other 34 coastal states and territories. And so we do have the fabrication facilities that can make the resources necessary, the infrastructure necessary for offshore wind. We do have the expertise and the vessels necessary to construct, to install these technologies. We do, as Director Salata noted, we do have the engineers and the capability to design structures that can stand in the Gulf of Mexico, even though we do have different soils and we even have the floating platform capabilities. And so our workforce is already in place. And as the National Renewable Energy Lab in Boulder, Colorado, has estimated, a place I visited, just amazing capabilities, that a 600 megawatt offshore facility could generate as many as 4,500 jobs in initial construction, with a GDP of $445 million and sustained activity of 14 million and about 150 jobs on an annual basis, which is pretty impressive. So I do think that it's important for us to keep in mind the Gulf of Mexico is already sort of zoned for this type of energy production, and we already have the workforce and the expertise in the Gulf proximate to where these facilities would be located. Looking forward, and Director Lefton and I have had the opportunity to talk about this, the International Energy Administration has indicated that we're looking at a 50% increase in energy demand by 2050, a 50% increase in global energy demand by 2050. And we've got to make sure that we're using all of our resources in order to meet that growing global demand. And truly, in all of the above energy strategy and the Gulf of Mexico opportunities associated with wind needs to be part of that strategy. We also need to keep in mind that it's not just about throwing turbines up in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a much bigger network or system, and I strongly urge you to be thoughtful about this. We don't have, as I mentioned before, a lot of population necessarily that lives on our coast. And so while we do energy production in the Gulf, we don't have the transmission necessarily. The grid is not designed to basically take on all of this offshore production. That needs to be part of your consideration. And I understand we're crossing over Department of Energy's jurisdiction, but it's a really important part of the overall calculation here, because if we're not being thoughtful about the entire system, we could end up in a situation where we're producing energy but don't have the place to actually offload or utilize it or store it. And that, again, needs to be part of the consideration. Transmission, utilization, storage, or other components of this overall system that we're looking at. Lastly, I mentioned has a 50% increase in global demand for energy. There's going to be a 40% increase in global demand for natural gas. Louisiana today exports natural gas to 36 countries, and according to the National Energy Technology Labs, U.S. gas is a 42 to 47% lower emissions profile than Russian gas, which is often supplying our NATO allies and many folks in Europe and Asia. We cannot, BOEM looks at everything, all sources of energy in the offshore. We cannot ignore this increase in global demand for natural gas, the amazing resources we have in the offshore Gulf of Mexico, and the potential role that that can play, resulting in lower global emissions. And I think that as you move forward, I understand it's a renewable energy panel, but BOEM is responsible for all energy production. And it's important for us to keep in mind that the U.S. continuing to produce natural gas and exporting it results in lower global emissions, because other countries, especially developing nations, are not going to adopt more expensive energy sources. They will be looking at the lowest cost. And right now, production in the state of Louisiana, production in the United States is some of the most affordable energy, and we already have the network capable of exporting it around the globe. So I want to thank you all very much. Certainly stand ready to assist you in anything you may need legislatively to help facilitate some of the renewable offshore production. But I want to thank you all for the opportunity to testify today.
All right. Thank you very much, Congressman Graves, and thank you as well to Director Lefton, Governor Edwards, and Regional Director Salata.